All right, so you're back with us for another deep dive today into something that we all struggle with from time to time, I
Yeah,
think.
definitely.
It's something that the Product Leaders Playbook really hit on the head recently, and we wanted to unpack that a little bit with you today.
hmm
So today we're going to be talking all about this thing called the Feature Factory Trap and how to avoid it.
It's so real.
So to start us off, can you just give us the high-level overview of what exactly is the Feature Factory Trap?
Yeah, so I think we've all probably been in this situation, maybe without even realizing it, where we're just so heads down, cranking out features,
Right.
getting those releases out, hitting those deadlines.
Right.
And really what we need to take a step back and think about is, okay, are these features actually moving the needle? Are they actually helping us
Right.
achieve our business goals? Are they delivering value to our users, or are we just shipping features for the sake of shipping features?
Right. Yeah. Is it just motion or is it actually progress?
Exactly. And the product leaders playbook called it out really nicely by saying a lot of times this happens because,
Yeah.
teams are incentivized to just ship, 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 ship.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's easy to measure, oh, we shipped 10 features this quarter,
Right.
but it's much harder to take a step back and say, okay, but what was the actual impact of those 10 features?
Right.
Did they actually move our North Star metric? Did they actually make a difference in the lives of our users? Or did we just, crank out a bunch of stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you actually know then if you're stuck in this trap, if your team is really in that feature factory mode?
Yeah, so the newsletter gave some really clear signs, and I think it's a good self-audit, if you will, to see if you're falling into this trap. And one of the biggest ones is if you're constantly measuring success by, like you said, the number of features shipped,
Mm-hmm.
not by actual improvement in your key metrics.
Yeah.
Another one is if your PMs are like, just completely swamped with just managing roadmaps and deadlines and not actually taking that time to really understand deeply what the customers need and are we actually solving problems.
Right. Yeah. It's more about just getting things done and not really thinking about what you're actually doing.
Exactly. It's that output versus outcome. And I think that's something that we'll talk about more.
Yeah. And it seems like that's kind of at the core of this is that, people think that shipping more just automatically leads to better results, but that's not really the case, is it?
Not always, no.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to really understand the difference between outputs and outcomes.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit then. What is that difference?
Yeah, so an output is, like I was saying earlier, we shipped a new onboarding flow.
Right.
That's an output.
Right.
But the outcome is, did it actually improve our activation rate? Did users actually get through that onboarding flow more successfully?
Right.
Did they convert at a higher rate? That's the outcome, and that's what we should really be focusing on.
Okay, so then how do you actually make that shift to really thinking about outcomes?
Well, the Product Leaders Playbook had a few really good questions to ask, and I think these should be like mandatory before you build anything.
Mm.
The first one is like, why are we even building this? Like,
Yeah.
what problem are we trying to solve for the user? Is it a real problem? And the second one is, how are we going to measure success?
Yeah.
Like, what's the metric that this is going to influence
Yeah.
and by how much? And I think that's a really important thing to define up front.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think another question is like, what happens if we don't build it? Is it really a priority, or are we just, kind of getting distracted by this shiny new object?
Right. Yeah. So it's really all about being intentional with what you're building.
Exactly.
So then beyond just, the number of features you ship, what are some other metrics that teams should really be looking at?
Yeah, so I think user behavior is really important to look at. Are they adopting the new feature? Are they engaging with it? Are they retaining?
Mm-hmm.
Is it actually having a positive impact on their usage of the product? But then also we need to connect it to the business goals. So is it driving revenue? Is it improving conversion rates? Is it making us more efficient? Right. And then also I think customer satisfaction is really important. So are we actually solving problems for our users?
Yeah. Are people happy?
Exactly. Are they happier because we shipped this feature?
Right.
So NPS surveys, qualitative feedback,
Right.
all that good stuff.
So let's say someone is listening to this and they're like, oh, wow, we are totally in a feature factory. How do they actually break free from that?
Yeah, so the product leaders playbook actually gives some really concrete steps for this.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is like, start with the problem, not the feature. Like really validate that the problem is worth solving before you jump into solutioning.
Right. Yeah.
And then the second one is like define success up front, like before you even start building anything. What's
Yeah.
the key metric you're trying to move and make that visible to the entire team so everyone's aligned.
Right.
And then lastly, treat every release as an experiment. So don't just ship it and move on.
Yeah.
Analyze the data, learn from what happened,
Right.
iterate and optimize based on those results.
So really what you're saying is just focus on delivering value, not just churning out features.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
High-performing teams focus on solving problems and driving outcomes,
Right.
not just outputs.
And I think, we've all probably seen examples of this where teams are just so focused on getting things done and not really thinking about the impact. So for our listeners this week, I want you to think about a time where you've seen that happen and what were the consequences of that and what could have been done differently.
It's a good question to think about.
To really focus on those outcomes instead, I think that's a really valuable exercise.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right, so that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We'll catch you next time.
See you.